And I would say it takes a man or a lady with a strong spine to be able to stand after 10 shots of whiskey in quick succession. And that's what you'd be expected to do. So that's a different cultural aspect for you. Now we have W at the end. That's Wei Wei. So Wei Wei, are you around, or are you just on silent?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you're here. Let everyone see you, Wei Wei. Is it good?
It's a bit awkward right now.
Okay, no problem. All right. So anyway, Wei Wei is my assistant, and so she will be coming in and out. All right. So Ursula, last but not least, Madame Ursula, share with us your favorite tipple, please.
Oh, well, it depends on my mood actually, and it
Ah,
depends on the weather. Um,
finally, an honest
yeah,
person.
yeah. You know, in the summer and warm weather, I tend to like gin and tonic, and
Right.
it depends on which of the gins. And I do like. I'm Scottish, so I do like Scotch. I don't. I actually do like Scotch. So sometimes in the winter,
Mhm.
I like a Scotch, and I've just discovered I'm part Irish, so I only just discovered that. So I
Right.
guess I'm going to have to develop a taste for Irish whiskey, but
Well,
that's TBA.
well, we'll talk a little bit about that today.
But
So
mostly wine.
mostly wine. All right.
Yeah.
So what I thought is, what I've heard from you all today is mainly, the topic is whiskey. Of course, there's Scotch, but other whiskeys. But most of you have really shared with me your expression for whiskeys from Scotland. I've not really heard much about Irish whiskeys, Canadian, US, India, France, Taiwan. Have any of you tried Japanese? So whiskey is not just related just to Scotland. So how about I start my presentation with you? Would that be all right? Okay, perfect. Oh, so I need to, do I need to, oh, I am the host. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so let's see how this works now. Let me get back there and share my screen. Perfect. Okay, there we are. Okay, you can all see that? All right, let's see. Right, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about whiskey. So today what we're going to touch on is going to be a little bit about distilled spirits versus wine, what whiskey is, the application and methodology, what is a pot still, and what is a continuous still. When we talk about the grains, what are we referring to? How do we pair whiskey? And we talk about the nuances of sharing whiskey with others in a cultural aspect. So I've just shared with you what they do in Asia. So it's not just the one communal type of toasting and raising cheers to the guest, but it's every person doing that singularly. Okay, so with regard to the history of distillation, what you are drinking, at the end of the day, after a hard day's work, originated over 2,000 years ago in a place called Mesopotamia and moving right through up to modern day. Now, one of the aspects that most people don't really realize is prior to the rise of Islam and Muhammad and in Iran, there was a place called the House of Wisdom. And this was in Persia in those days. Now, the House of Wisdom was a collation of scholars, prized intellectuals of the day, and words that we use like algorithms, alcohol, algebra, these are all Arabic words. So the word alcohol actually is an Arabic word. And while the majority, mostly, of Muslims don't drink now, but they did before. So how does the history of whiskey? So it starts with in 1000 AD with the Moors. Originally, whiskey, like Coca-Cola, was used as for medicinal purposes. So for the plague, for the medical part. And then around 1000 to 1200, we then had the Scottish and Irish monasteries. They would distill grain mash. Now, in between the 12 and 1500s, just around 1400, that's when you started to have, what they call the Black Death and all the repercussions of that. And that's when people would go into isolation. Now, I know some of you may enjoy drinking from Burgundy. So if you do, you may have heard of the phrase called clos, C-L-O-S, which means walled. So what that indicated was during the time of the plague in Europe, many monasteries were closed off, walled off. Their vineyards were walled off. And they have retained that to this day. And that's why Burgundian wines are extremely expensive, because it still retains that same patch of land and has not increased. Now, you must also bear in mind that historically, it was only the monks and the clerics that were able to read and write. It was not the ordinary individual. The society that we live in today is very different to the society of medieval England and Europe. You had your king, you had your nobles. Well, you had your king, your clergy, your nobles, and then you had the peasants. So this is really a huge transformation. And we come to the 1600s. Now, when we start to look at the European colonists bringing the practice of distilling whiskey not only to America, but to South Africa, to Australia, and many other places. Now, you then have this, what they call the Whiskey Rebellion, all right? And as you know, Scots, and I say this with the greatest respect, so there was a joke, they said. There's an Englishman, not an English, there's a Scots, a Chinese, a Jew, and an Indian. And they're all doing business together. And they said, okay, who would be the last one to survive? And they said it would be the Scotsman. Why? Because they're extremely thrifty. And that's what my grandfather would share with me. And one of my best friends was a Scots lad. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but his last name is similar to mine, and it's called Lee. So here's something for tradition. I know some of you may know about Hogmanay. Ursula, would you like to share that, please? What is Hogmanay to the rest of the group?
Oh, Hogmanay is a Scottish New Year, but it's actually it's the 31st of December. In fact, it was my grandmother's birthday, but it's celebrated in Scotland maybe as the beginning of New Year.
That's right. And was there anything special? The first
Yes, you had the first footer, and preferably with a lump of coal
Yes.
years ago, which was good luck for
That's
the
right.
reasons that coal is needed, etc., or
And-
was needed at the time.
and
But
what-
always you can't come across the threshold without something, a gift or something in your hand. It doesn't have to be a gift, it has to be something in your hand. And it was a tradition in our family for sure.
Absolutely. And they would prefer to have the first footer to have black
Yes.
hair.
Yeah, a dark, tall, dark male.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Traditionally, yeah.
and that was why I was always selected. I had a lot more hair then than I do now, but I was always the one that would be the first footer. So that's something traditional for you. Okay. So today, whiskey is now produced in over 25 countries around the world.
Amazing.
While many of us think that whiskey is just synonymous with Scotland, it's not really. It's really much more pervasive. Okay, so Nicole, we have whiskey without an E and with an E. Which one is correct in your opinion? Can't hear you.
One that made me sick had an E.
Okay, the one that made you sick. Well, the general rule is if you have an E, then it means that the country that it's made in has an E too.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a sort of general rule. But, like Ireland, so there's an E. America has an E. Canada doesn't have an E, right? Scotland doesn't have an E. So it's
So-
just a general rule. It's not hard and fast.
to throw a wrench into it, what's the difference between whiskey with a Y, whiskey with an E, and bourbon?
I
I have friends that live in the States and they've invited us for the Bourbon Trail.
yes, that's quite different. And could I answer that later?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. But good question. Thank you. All right. So what is whiskey? All right, Dean, would you mind reading that for us, please?
So, what is whiskey? The word whiskey, from Celtic origin, comes from the Gaelic expression, oh yeah, sure, thanks. Really?
Ushkabe.
Askebasta hushiha beta, meaning water of
ushkabe.
life.
Meaning water of life, yeah.
Whiskey is distilled spirit that is made from the variety of cereal grains, included barley, corn, rye, and wheat.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Nicole, when we're talking about bourbon, it must be 51% corn. That's why it's always sweeter. Thank you for that, Dean. Very good. So here we are. We have rye, we have corn, we have wheat, and we have barley. I don't have that much time with you, so I won't go into the different types of wheat, but the different types of wheat does make a difference. And then, of course, we have the importance of water. Now, David, could you read this for us, please? David, are you there? Okay. No, David? So the importance of water, they always talk about the spring water, right? That comes from the mountains. And if you do some research on the Japanese whiskey, you'll find how important it is. Water is not as simple as we think it to be, because there's hard water, there's light water, there's water with more ions or less ions, and they definitely do make a difference. But if you're going to learn about Scotch, you need to remember the phrase Ushkabe, because Ushkabe, oftentimes you could go to a distillery and they say Ushkabe to you. All right, that means the water of life, and often people say cheers to that. Peat is something that they use quite often in Scotland. I know some of you do enjoy having the peatiness of whiskey, and you wonder where that comes from. So does anyone know what peat is? Would anyone like to hazard? David, Mr. Thompson? Yeah, Scott?
Well, Mr. Thompson can go if he wants.
No, I don't think so. You go ahead, Scott.
Well, it's compressed organic material.
Right. Do we have anything similar to that here in BC?
Burns Bog.
Exactly, Burns Bog. So that's all peat there, and it's protected, but that is exactly what they use. And that's where we get the actual smell. Now, I want to share with you, many of you have been kind enough to let me know what you like. And I think it's important that I share with you, there is no right, there is no wrong. Don't let anyone tell you, oh, this whiskey that you're drinking, it's not really good. It's like wine. If you like that particular whiskey, then that's what you should have. And that's what you should buy. But what I do want to share with you is perhaps you can understand and open up your mind and be an adventurer. But be an adventurer that is educated. And that's why I'm going to share with you the process. Because when you drink the whiskey, you'll be able to analyze why it tastes the way it does. So let's look at the process. I think many of you have seen this figure before from school days, chemistry, bringing back a few memories and jogging a few thoughts here and there. Well, this process is transformed into this. So these are known as your stills. So let's have a look, see here. Now, can you see my mouse? You can, okay. You see this line here? This is called the line arm, L-Y-N-E. This is called a pot still. Why? So imagine you're invited to someone's home and Molly is making a roast beef. That is a singular piece of beef that she is making. And once that is completed, that's it. Now, whereas you may go to a McDonald's and they will have a continuous line. The comparison I'm making is this pot still is known as a singular fermentation, a singular distillation vessel. Now can I share a secret with you? Some of you, when you try the whiskey, you'll find it a little bit oily, some of them. Have some of you found that to be the case? You know, some whiskeys that you've tried a little oily, some perhaps not so oily. Well, the secret is here. It's in the line arm. The angle of that line arm, the size, the width, the breadth, and the length will determine the oiliness of that whiskey. Why? The shorter it is and the wider it is, when they're distilling, that vapor can go through much quicker. So it's actually not being distilled as fine as possible. It's very quick. Whereas if you have a longer line arm and it's more narrower, that's when you're going to get the finer, more elegant type of whiskeys. So next time you drink a whiskey and you get that oiliness, you know where it's coming from. Does that make sense to you? Okay. And while we're on with distillation, I just share with you, Scotch whiskey is distilled twice. There's not many that are distilled 3 times. Does anyone know which one is distilled 3 times? Anyone hazard a guess? Joe? Peter? Not at all? Okay. How about Auchentoshan? Auchentoshan. If you were to take an Auchentoshan and any other Scotch and you were to sample them side by side, you would find a huge difference. The Auchentoshan is smoother. All Irish whiskey is triple distilled, but Scotch whiskey is only double distilled. All right? Okay. Any questions at all by anyone, or may I continue?
I had a question. Sorry, it's Jen here.
Hi, Jen.
Is it the longer the tube thingy is that it's more oily, or the shorter it is and the wider?
The shorter it is.
Shorter and wider, the less distilling, the more oily.
Yes.
Longer and thinner, the more distilling, less oily.
Less oily and more lighter as well.
Thank you.
Good, very good. Okay, so how do we actually make whiskey? All right, Lawrence, could you read out for me, please? Starting here. Malting.
Malting, germination, and steeping.
Right.
The drying.
Okay,
the
so what we
milling.
do is so let's talk about Scotch. We get the wheat, and then we will start to malt and germinate, and then we will dry it out, correct? And then
Milling, mashing, fermentation, distillation, maturation, blending, and then bottling.
okay. So think of it this way, gentlemen. We wake up in the morning, we don't shave and then put our shaving cream on after we've shaved. And then we wash our face and then we put aftershave on. Ladies, we're not going to put on our rouge and then put our base on. There's a procedure. And that's the same thing with whiskey. Now, it's at every single step of how they make whiskey, it's going to affect the flavor that you like. This here, what you see, this is the malting room. So this is all the wheat that's put out there. And then what they do is they add water and they allow it to start just before it starts to germinate. What they do is they start to heat up the entire room. Now, for those of you that like to have the Lafroig, the Lagavulin, the peatiness, they use that. They used to have it under the boards of this particular room, and they would light them up, and the heat and the smoke would create the dryness, so germination would stop, and the smokiness is what would envelop the actual wheat itself. That's where the wheat, the peatiness comes in. And that started in the island of Isla. And why? Because they don't have too many trees there. They don't have too many trees at all. So that's how whoa, let me see if I can get out of this. Oh yeah, that's better. And that's what happened there with regard to how peatiness came into it. So I know most of you read Chinese. Nancy wanted me to put that in for her. So Mr. Scott Wheatley, help me to read out, please. Barley started to soak.
Germination.
Correct.
Out to germinate.
Exactly.
Then stopped and dried in kiln, then known as malt.
That's when it's malt. That's when it's known as malted barley. Okay. So they put it out, they soak it, they spray water, they start to let it germinate, and they stop it by drying it out. Correct? Carry on, please.
Ground into rough flour known as grist.
This is important because most distilleries will not let you see that process.
If dried over peat, whiskey will be peaty.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. And that's what peat looks like. All right. They cut it up and they let it dry out, and then they will use it as fuel. What do we have here? Any guesses? Nicole?
I'm going to guess it's some sort of grinding or mixing stage.
You're very right. It's the mashing side. Laura, would you mind reading for us here?
So barley cooked in hot water 3 times in mash tun.
Mash tun, yes.
Each time getting hotter.
Right. Give me a minute. So what they do is they add the water. So now it's fermenting. They want to get the sugars. They want to get the sugars out. All right. So that's what they're doing. Every single time they do that, they're increasing the heat of the water. And what's coming out? That is known. Carry on, please.
Liquid drawn off, known as wort.
Correct.
Residue known as draff, used for animal feed.
So let's take that as an example. If we were using skins. So after we've made the wine, we have the grape skins.
Oh, okay.
Italians would use that to make grappa. But what they do, because you have the wheat now, you've added the hot water, boom, 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 you've mashed it all up, you're taking the liquid out, and you're left with this dry wheat. It's a residue, and they call that draff, and they give that to the animals. Okay, please.
Exactly like making beer. In fact, Welsh whiskey, Pendrin's whiskey mash is made at Brain's Brewery in Wales.
Right. So at this point, you then have, they've got all this wort, and if they decide they want to make whiskey, they're going this way. If they want to make beer, they go this way, and that's when they start looking at the hops. They start adding hops. Okay? Are we good so far? Because it's important that you understand this so that when you are meeting aficionados, you can say, oh yeah, so that's how the grist is. Yeah, I knew they have a special. They use the mash tun 4 times, you know? So everyone is slightly different. Right. We have some particularly impressive vessels here. We come to the world of fermentation. So they use huge Oregon pine washback barrels. So they've taken all the liquid and they put it into these washback barrels. So they put the wort into there. They add the yeast, and that's allowed to ferment for 2 to 3 days. That's where you start to get your characteristic whiskey smell. So remember, you've got to get the starch. So that's why they malt it for the starch levels to rise, and then they put it into the mash tun. They draw the liquid out, which is the wort, and then they put it into the Oregon pine, and that's where they add the yeast to make the fermentation, so they get the sugars. Are we good so far? Now, does anyone want to ask me about fermentation? Obvious question. Why Oregon pine? Anybody like to hazard a guess?
Well, I'm just curious how, if you're going to the United Kingdom, why would they have pine from Oregon? Or is that a breed of tree that is available in the United Kingdom?
No, it's a great question. And it's a question that I asked. And they said, well, the Oregon pine, they last for up to 25 years. They have very few knots in them, you know, the wood knots. And they found them to be durable. They find them to be very pliable. And that's why they've opted for those. And that's what they do. So that's a great question. It was a question I asked when I was visiting quite a number of distilleries in Scotland. So there's your pot stills. And when you go to the distillation process in the distillery, you'll see various styles of these and sizes. So the distillation, okay, so let's have someone else here to give us. Joe, would you like to read for us, please?
Go ahead. So malt whiskey.
You're on, can't hear you. Can't hear you, Joe. I'll call you again. Let me read it. Or maybe Mr. Thompson, would you like to help us out here?
Yes, distillation. Malt whiskey pot stills are always copper.
Always copper. Remember that. Always copper. Because the transfer of heat is very quick. Please carry on.
They're heated so that the alcohol evaporates.
Right.
It rises up the swan neck and along the line arm into worm tank to condense.
Right.
Creates low wines.
Hmm.
Into spirit still for second distillation. The residue is used for fertilizer or farm feed.
Excellent. So we have these pot stills, and the pot stills are made out of copper. It goes up. This curvature here, so this is the pot still, the curvature here. This is the line arm. I'm not talking about the line arm. I'm talking about the curvature here. That is known as the swan's neck. The angle will also determine the flavors. What comes out, they call a low wine. That's the phrase that they use. Now, what's interesting is once they've distilled it, they will take that liquid again, and then they will redistill it after they've separated it. And you're going to now discover what they separated into. We separate it into the foreshot, known as the heads, the heart or the middle, and the faint as the tails. So the foreshot in Scotland, foreshot, heart, and faint. Very important. Do not drink ever anything from the foreshot, because you will impede and do something very terrible to your health. And it may even affect your eyesight. So you often hear of illicit distilleries in India, maybe sometimes in southern US, where people die. That's because they are drinking pure ethanol. That's what you put into your car. All right, so do not ever do that. So the heart, so they have this distillation comes down, the foreshot they'll put one side, the heart they'll put into another, and the faint they'll put into another. And they call it a spirit safe. Why? Because it's under padlock from customs and excise from the British government. And that's what it looks like. So you see these three? Can you see my mouse? Can someone just nod if they see my, right. So this here are hydrometers. And based on the hydrometer, they will then place the 4 shots here, the hearts and the faint. Now, the flavor is in the faint because technically those are called congeners. That's where the flavor comes from. So they will take these two and then they will redistill it again. And that's the second time. What do they do with this part? They will add it to the next batch. They don't waste it. Any questions so far? May I continue? All right. Yes, Adam, I can continue. Thank you.
Sorry, just one thing. I think somebody's waiting in the waiting room, Dr. Lee. Are you able to
is
just go to the participants and click on admit to somebody?
Oh, thank you. You'll have to show me who is that that's coming in.
Somebody named Nancy, maybe?
Nancy.
Don't worry, Jen, she's able to see the presentation. She just is a participant. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
never mind.
Okay, can I continue? All right, okay. So this is from Bruichladdich, Isla, single malt. Now let's talk about barrels. Or let me talk about it later on, okay? Would that be all right? Ursula, will you remind me, please, to talk about barrels? Don't forget. Thank you. All right. Okay, so what's happened here? Maturation. In oak barrels, we have held, so oak barrels normally have held something else. They don't normally use fresh oak barrels. So let's take, so when I talk about this during the Q&A, Ursula, you remind me, okay? So sherry, bourbon, more than 3 years in Scotland, has to be 3 years and a day. To be called Scotch, it must be 3 years and a day. Don't forget the day. If you take it before the day, it's not 3 years. So that's important. Angel share, Adam, you were talking about that. That's what they actually take out and it evaporated at least 1 or 2% in Scotland. Does anyone can anyone have a guess? What is the angel share in India? They make whiskey there. What do you think their angel share is? David, hazard a guess? Dean? 5%?
5%.
Double it.
Woo!
Yeah, they lose about 10% because of the heat in India. All right. So if you talk about Scotland, you have 5 major areas: Speyside, Highlander, Lowlander, Isla, and Campbellton. So let's talk about this while we're here. You see the Lefroy? So next time when I have these sessions and you want to order the whiskey, it'll be a lot easier when I take you through the tastings. But this is a Lefroy, 10-year-old, and it comes from this part from Isla. It uses peat. You've seen the peat, and you now understand the method that it goes through. One thing I wanted to share with you. Do you see this? Can you see what it says? Established when? What year? 1815.
1815.
But that doesn't mean that's the year that they started to make whiskey. That's the year they became legitimate. That's what these numbers indicate. So that's Lefroy. Glenlivet, as we know, 1824. This was the first illicit distillery to become legal, because King George VI, he went through, he liked it. It was illegal. We couldn't have the head of the realm, okay? And as a result of that, he decided, Glenlivet, that he would make himself legal. And I think they were charging 2 and 6 in those days. So that's what happened there. Now, with regard to whiskey, We have Scottish, Irish, Canadian, American. We also have Japanese, and we have Indian, we have French. There's a plethora of whiskies coming out now from all over the world. But I wanted to share this with you because I think this is important. Mr. Thompson, when someone says to you single malt, would you be kind enough to read this, please? This is the definition of a single malt whiskey now.
Single malt, distilled at a single distillery from water and malted barley without the addition of any other cereals by batch distillation in pot stills, e.g. Glenfiddich and the Macallan.
So you know what the pot still is? It's only malted barley, nothing else. And it's from one single distillery. That's what they mean as a single malt. Dean, could you read single grain, please, Dean?
Yes, a single grain, distilled at a single distillery by continuous distillation. The water and the malt barley with or without whole grains of the malted or unmalted cereals, typically wheat, e.e. Cameron Briggs or pot.
So no, this is not a pot still. This is a continuous. It just keeps on distilling. And it's not only just malted barley. It could be with the addition of others. So if someone says to you, this is a single malt whiskey from a continuous, it's not single malt. It is malted, but it's not single malt. To be single, it must come from a pot still. So if there's anything you take away from me today, that is something that you really want to make sure, because not everyone, not every barman in other parts of the world are always as well versed. And that's something you should know for yourself. Right, Dean, you read this one because you like Shivas.
Blended, a blend of single malt Scotch whiskies with single grain Scotch whiskies.
So it's a blend now. Many different whiskies. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very famous, it's a lovely whiskey. I've had it many, many times, but now you know what you're drinking.
Yeah, it was my dad's thing.
Yep, perfect. Right, now we get a blended malt. Scott, would you read for me, please?
Sir, a blend of single malt Scotch whiskies distilled at more than one distillery. Example.
More than one distillery now. Remember, single malt is a singular distillery. Blended is from more than one. And blended grain, a blend of single grain whiskies distilled at more than one distillery. I don't think you'll be drinking this. Who was that? Was it Natalie? Was it Natalie who became very sick with some cheap whiskeys when she was young? I don't know if she's still around, but that's what you probably would have had. Nicole, yes, Nicole. And that's what would be the paragon of virtue for most whiskey lovers. One of the very large whiskey bars that I went to in Scotland. So let's talk about pairings. Chocolate, steak, and let's get to the real evaluation now. Do you all have some whiskey with you? Have you got a whiskey in front of you? Okay, so I'm going to show you something now. When you evaluate wine, I'll pick it up, and what's the first thing I do after I look at the color? I will go like this, right? And then I will nose it. So can you do that, all of you, please, with your own whiskey? I'm going to stop sharing now.
Does it matter which one we start with?
No, doesn't matter. Just choose anyone.
Can you make me host again, please, before stop sharing?
Of course. Right, where are we? There we are, Scott. I'm getting quite adept at this now. Okay, have you all done that? Right, now what are you smelling? Probably something not very pleasing, because all you're smelling literally is pure alcohol.
Oh, so
because that's 40%.
None of
That's what
the,
you're doing. All you're doing is you're putting
Flavor?
40% alcohol and you're going like that, and then you're nosing it. So you're just smelling alcohol. So that's your lesson number one. Do not swirl. Right, so the whiskey's been poured for you. You may look at the color eagerly, attentively. It means nothing. All right, because in Scotland and other places, the distilled spirit is a clear spirit, and it needs to be in oak barrels for an enormously long time to gain any color. But I'm not going to get into that too much. But what they do is they add E1 330, which is a coloring. And yes, there is to a degree if it's a Fino or if it's a sherry barrel, but that'll be for another lecture. But the point is, color has nothing to do with it. It's not like wine. And so you pick it up, look at it, make sure there's no debris, okay? And then just nose it. Now, what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, take a little bit of that, put it into the palm of your hand, the whiskey. Put a little bit in the palm of your hand, and then rub your hands like this aggressively, like aftershave, okay? And then go like this. So you look like a true Scotsman when you do that. Right? Are you smelling it? It's becoming different, right? Perfect. So especially if you're the Lefroy lovers, I think, who was the Lefroy lover here?
Yeah,
I think it was Joe. Joe, you like Lefroy, right? Now, the other thing that you do, right? I'm going to stand up. So do you all get a different aroma now? Laura, Adam, Cab, you get a different aroma, right? Dean? So there's nothing wrong with that. Another way they've poured the whiskey for you, you've nosed it, you've done this, you pick up the nose. Another thing is, take your hand and cup the glass and put it to your chest, to your belly. For those that are more affluent, you will have more body heat. For those of you that and keep it to your stomach and keep it there and don't move it. Make sure it's touching your body and keep it for about 3 minutes and cover it like this. And what will happen, you will get, so keep it there, don't remove it. You will get condensation. So just keep it there. So while you have that, I'm going to talk about, Nicole, didn't you have to remind me about something? Keep your hand on.
Sorry, I'm keeping it covered. It's.
Did you have to remind me about something? I know Ursula was barrels.
I didn't get.
Oh, you had a question. Okay,
let me remind you about something.
Two types of main barrels. One is American. One is
not
French. Okay, American and French.
Good one, Nicole.
If you get coconut and you get vanilla, that is an American oak barrel.
Okay, vanilla is the American.
Okay, well, American, it's coconut and it is
vanilla.
If it's just vanilla, it's going to be French.
No.
Now, what I want you to do, hold the glass, hold the top still, lift your glass here. You should see condensation. Can you see it?
Not in paper cups.
Right. Now,
I can, yes.
Now nose it.
This one stinks like manure.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be. I think, Jen, that one, when you go like this, just imagine the wind has been blowing, it's been raining, the raindrops have been pelting your face, and you've walked for about 30 minutes in the cold. You open the door to the cabin, the fire is burning, and you quickly go there, and that's what
yeah, it stinks like poo, man.
So did you all pick up something else?
The vanilla was very.
You're going to taste, you're going to sip your whiskey. Don't go like this and look like this. Don't do that. Rather let it sit. You can go like that. Your second one would be to put it to your stomach perhaps. And your third way, the third way would be to do it that way. Yeah? Okay, now let me share one more method with you. Watch what I do when I'm actually
I did.
going to, Nicole, can you, okay, can you just go on silent there, please? Because we can hear everything, okay? So what I'm going to do now, let me just switch on the light here.
Totally smells.
Ah, that's better. Put some light on the subject, shall we? Right. This is how you take whiskey. Watch what I do. I take a sip. Right? If you do that with whiskey, you're going to burn yourself. It's not going to be appealing at all because you're just putting 40% alcohol inside your mucous membrane. And then you're going to say, oh, I don't like whiskey. So this is what we're going to do, if I may suggest. This is your tongue. Take a quarter teaspoon, right? Watch what I do. Just watch what I do. Take a quarter teaspoon. I'm going to put that right in the cup of my tongue. And then I'm going to imagine I'm having one of the best steaks ever, or a piece of chicken, or a broccoli if you're vegetarian, whatever you wish. Okay, you can imagine it. And you're going to keep on chewing, jum, 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 until you feel the saliva coming in, and it's going to give you that lovely liquid. And then after you've done that, you're going to go, then swallow. All right, are we good? Shall we all do it together? All right, all together now. Little sip. Swallow. Different? Different from the way you've tried whiskey before, yes? Now, Peter, I see you actually do have the Glenrothes. This is a fiery whiskey, all right? Fiery whiskey. Okay, yep. That should be very fiery, Peter, okay? So next time when I do the whiskey tastings, because I wasn't sure where, where some of you may have managed to get these whiskeys, if not, but that's fine. Next time I do this, I can arrange for all of you, so I know that you all have it. So that's why I didn't particularly do that today. I did it more in terms of what we're actually going to follow as a procedure for future. So now you've learned the procedure of how whiskey evolved, a bit of the history, and most importantly, the methodology and the tasting of whiskey. Yeah, I hope that's helped. And we've mentioned barrels, we've mentioned some tradition. So not wanting to keep you for too long, perhaps I might at this stage end off the lecture. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Are there any questions out there? Yes, Ursula. Can't hear you, Ursula.
I'll just turn it. I was just wondering, you maybe I missed it, but you didn't mention a drop of water to open the whiskey up, which is what I've been told in the past.
All right.
Is that right?
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention. I just wondered. Yeah.
No, absolutely. There's no right. There's no wrong. The only right person that can tell you what is good for you in terms of your own flavor profile is you. So don't let anyone say to you, oh, you can't do that. This is blasphemy. No. Whiskey is made through heat. When you rubbed it in your hands, you were using heat to open it up. When you put it to your stomach, you are causing condensation to open up the flavors. What most people do is sometimes they will use some water, but they do that. Sometimes people will say, I'll have scotch on the rocks. Now, when you have ice, what you're doing is you're basically taking out that high alcohol, that you know, when you drink anything that's alcoholic, you get a burning sensation. So when you put an ice cube there, you're basically dulling that sensation. So, but if you're going to add a dab of water, experiment as you like. There's no right and there's no wrong. That's all I'm saying to you. Okay. But if you really, as I said, if you like to have with the rocks, then by all means, don't let anyone tell you it's you know, it's a faux pas. No such thing. Yes.
Is there a
David.
way, do you need to test for the oiliness of it, like the legs of it or anything like that?
Well, if you want to test so they call it the legs, they call it the windows, they call it the church windows, legs, tiers. It's when you go like this and you'll see those legs coming down. Now, because whiskey is 40%, those legs or tiers should be quite thick and quite slow. If it is lighter, like 13% or 11 with wine, they'll be thinner and they'll be faster. So you didn't know you enrolled on the Sherlock Holmes course, how to identify whiskeys, did you, David? Okay, good. Now let me share something with you. You're in China. They say, I've got some really good Glenlivet for you. Okay, so how do you know that it's the real thing? Well, you go like this and you turn it up. And those bubbles, they should dissipate within 5 seconds. And if they don't, I'd choose another bottle. Okay, so that's a little trick for you. All right.
I have a question.
Who's that? Who's that?
Adam,
Oh,
you somebody's microphone.
hello.
Hello.
He
Because we're getting anyway, so I had specifically requested when we bought some of these drinks to get
Yes.
18-year-old Glenn Fiddick.
Yes.
But he got the 18-year-old Glenlivet by mistake.
Okay. Right.
He's
What's
cute,
the
though.
what's the difference that we would notice on that?
Well, if you're speaking to the Glenfiddich man, he said, that's absolute trash, man. You should be drinking my whiskey. And if you're speaking to the Glenlivet fellow, he'll be saying, you have a far superior taste palate, sir. So
Right. Well, that's it. Well, I know there was a Smith that started the Glenlivet
That's true.
distillery,
Around
and then there was another Smith that stole the idea and went to Glenfiddich, right?
that's true. That's true. But they're both from Speyside. Both have that sort of general, you know, crispy lemon fruitiness to it. And it's quite light. It's not like the heavy. I've heard Oban being thrown around. Definitely the Isla is going to be there. And who was it? Was it Cam? You went to Inverness, you McAllen and that. So so they're both from Speyside. So what I can say to you is that those two particular whiskies, much of a muchness. Now, if you are, I don't think you tell the difference after your fourth dram, to be honest.
Right.
But,
It's the first one that counts.
well, that's true. So, you know, I think they're both of superior heritage. So if you really don't like it, I'll
Oh, I don't think we're going to have an issue.
just drop it at my winery, and I'll be more than happy.
We might drop the Lafrague off, I'm thinking, but
One that smells like manure?
well,
You know what?
Pete,
I work for free here, so any donations
let's have some of the 18-year-old.
you're welcome.
Get a fresh one.
Okay. Any other question,
This is good.
Ursula?
Get your
Just
fresh-
a quick question.
Yes.
A quick question. What do you think of Glenora, Cape Breton, the Cape Breton whiskey? What do you think of it?
Yes.
I wasn't there, but I just wonder what you thought about it.
Well, you know, Cape Breton, they have a different type of style. Again, with that particular, some of it, I would relate it more to the age, okay? Because when you pick up a whiskey that is quite young, we call it fiery. It's very fiery. It's really explosive. It's really full, like youthfulness. So if you were to take not only the Cape Breton, but most whiskeys, let them mature.
I don't mind this one.
ease with
I
age.
could drink that one.
They will be
Yeah,
quite
it's water.
marvelous, quite marvelous. The major differences you're going to pick up is going to be absolutely the Lefroy Isla. So I'll take one last question, and then I'll hand over back to Scott. Any other last question?
I just tasted the Lafrague and I quite like that. And that's just very mildly peaty. So the Oban that I had, was it Oban that I had that was very, very heavily
Yes,
peaty?
yes. Oban is probably one of the most peatiest type of whiskies that you will get.
So is it just their process that's different?
No, it's called a parts per million. So how much peatiness they have, it's called ppm. So obviously the lighter it is, then, you know, you're obviously a man of that sort of suave, you know, joie de vivre. You don't like that heavy, blustering Conan the Destroyer type of taste and
I don't know if Catherine agrees though.
Well, Catherine paid me. You can pay me later, Catherine.
Well, a couple more of these and we'll see. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So just to end off, it's been a huge pleasure for me and thank you all very much for taking your time to join myself. I hope you take the time to perhaps go to Apwasi, apwasi.com. There is a preview course there, and we have whiskey as well. So we have a whiskey course, which was developed and written by my team. Now, Scott, do you think we had a great turnout today?
I think we had a great turnout. I think it can be even greater the next time we do it. And hopefully the next time we can do it in person, because having a drink should be shared amongst friends.
That's true. That's true. So what I'm possibly wanting to do is perhaps give what I'll do is I'll give out one free course on whiskey. All right. And the value of that is $345 US. That's how much it would cost. So I think we have to have a methodology of the question we're going to ask, Scott, or shall we let, unless we get them to get into the preview, I'll know who they are, and then I'll do a lucky draw from there. What do you think, Scott?
I think probably the only fair way is a lucky draw.
A lucky draw, okay. How are we going to do that now?
I have a question. What was the Japanese
No,
whiskey
you can't
we're
win,
talking
Jen.
about?
No, you can't.
Damn it. What was the Japanese whiskey you were talking about? The one that smells like
Yamashita.
Gewürztraminer.
Yamashita.
How do you spell that?
Yama, Yamashida. I will get the where it's available, and then you can get it. Okay. It's from a very,
Thank you.
yeah, it's quite delicious. I fell in love with the nosing on that because I did a tasting about.
How does that compare to the Centauri?
Sorry?
How does that compare to Centauri?
Centauri is a huge, massive conglomerate that churns out different types of alcohol. These are very small home distilleries in the sort of rural Japan. They don't produce enormous amounts. So that's the difference. Yeah. Yeah. They're not these mammoths, the behemoths that you'll find in the room. But nothing wrong. I mean, you know, Nikas are really good. Hibiki 17, 21, you can't buy those now. But Amarut, have any of you tried Amarut or Paul John? Tyler, welcome to you. Nice to see you. Joe, have you tried Amarut? Okay. If you're ever feeling adventurous, you could do that. So going back to that, Scott, what shall we do? Shall we do it with a raise of hands or?
Or we could do what I used to do when I was coaching. We could play the birthday game.
Sure. Okay.
Whoever has a birthday in March. Does anybody have a birthday in March?
39 days till my birthday.
Okay. Nancy.
So we have 3 contestants in March.
Okay. Shall we get Nancy to pick a date?
Sure.
And the one closest to it? Choose any number, Nancy, except 0. Between 1 and 31 only, not 32. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Gotta unmute now.
August.
No, it's in March, Nancy.
Oh, March the 8th. Sorry about that. March
Okay,
the
8th.
8th.
Who's closest to 8? What's your birthday, Cam? Cam?
What was the day?
8.
8th.
8, right?
You're on mute, Cam.
He's been
What's
drinking.
your birth?
Mine's the 13th.
13th. Tyler?
11th.
I'm the 6th, 06.
11th.
6th of March. You're the 11th of March. Dean?
11th.
You're the 11th as well. Okay.
You said it.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what.
Did I say the 13th? I meant the 8th.
Yeah.
You're 13, Cam, and Dean is 11, and Tyler's 6, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Belated birthday.
There's only 3, Scott. Is that right? There's only 3.
3.
Okay. So you know what? You've been such a fabulous crowd, and Nancy got the month wrong, but I guess we had no surprises what number she's going to choose, as she's Asian, because it's 8. All right. They all choose 8. Who would figure, eh? So Scott, what I'm going to do for this fabulous crowd, and Tyler, even though were you around all the time?
Yes.
Really? Okay. What's the preferred metal that the pot still should be made from?
Copper.
Okay, good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give not just 1, not just 2, but I'm going to give 3 courses out. So
Oh,
Tyler,
wow.
you'll get 1, Cam and Dean. All right. It's been a huge pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope to see you again. And Scott, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And everyone, please, if you have the time, get onto Apwazi, apwasi.com, and support us, please.
Yeah. But Dr. Lee, I just want to thank you very much. It's been an amazing night. I
was
know
great.
everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was
Thank you
awesome.
very
Thanks,
much.
Dr. Lee.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
You take
thank you.
care. Be safe.
Thank
Even
you.
if you did choose a manure wine.
Bye-bye. Oh,
Jazz hands.
Dean, can you get the name? Sorry, Dean, Scott, can you get me the names of the winners, please?
I will, for sure.
I need their full names and I need their email. And I also need their bank account and password.
Thanks, Dr. Lee.
All right, take care, everyone. See you.
Bye.
Bye.